In this lecture, I will consider several types of cryptographic attacks. But first, let's consider what it means for a cryptographic algorithm to be secure. There are several definitions of security that apply to crypto systems. Unconditional security is a measure from information theory stating that even an adversary with unlimited computational resources lacks sufficient information to defeat the system. In the context of encryption systems, unconditional security is referred to as perfect secrecy, a condition that occurs when the uncertainty in the plaintext after observing the ciphertext is equal to the uncertainty in the plaintext before observing the ciphertext. In other words, the posterior plaintext uncertainty is the same as the a priori uncertainty, and we can say that the ciphertext tells us nothing about the plaintext. In practical terms, this can only be achieved if the key is at least as long as the message and is never reused. In other words, perfect secrecy can only be achieved by a one-time pad. Ideal secrecy of a crypto system is due to Shannon and relates to a concept called unicity distance. Unicity distance is a measure of the amount of ciphertext needed for it to be likely for there to be only one meaningful plaintext decryption. It depends on the entropy of the key space and the redundancy of the message language. A unicity distance larger than the available ciphertext implies that an attacker will see false positives during cryptanalysis, candidate decryptions that appear to be valid plaintext messages. Given these candidates, the attacker will have no way to know which is the genuine message. Clearly, the larger the unicity distance, the more difficulty an attacker will have. In light of this, Shannon defined a crypto system with ideal secrecy to be one whose unicity distance was infinite. Provable security is a property of a crypto system when the difficulty of defeating it can be shown to be as difficult as solving some well-known hard problem, such as integer factorization. Computational security, sometimes called practical security, measures the amount of computational effort required to defeat a system using the best known methods. If this amount exceeds, by some comfortable margin, the amount of resources available to an attacker, then we say that a system is computationally secure. Methods in this class may be related to hard problems like in the provable security class, but in this case, no equivalence proof exists. Finally, an ad hoc level of security refers to one based on any form of convincing argument that a successful attack requires a level of resource beyond that of the attacker. In this class, security claims remain questionable, and unforeseen attacks remain a threat. Now we will turn our attention to categories of cryptographic attacks. In the ciphertext-only attack, the attacker has several examples of ciphertext from the same crypto systems and key, and their goal is to recover the plaintext messages and possibly the key as well. Frequency analysis is an example of a technique that would be used in this type of attack. Note that in some cases it is possible to recover plaintext without the decryption key. For example, a public key crypto system with a low uncertainty in the plaintext space can be attacked by simply encrypting all possible messages using the recipient's public key. Once a matching ciphertext is found, the message has been determined even though the private key is still unknown. This attack can be defeated by padding messages with random bits. In the known plaintext attack, the attacker not only has several examples of ciphertext, but also the corresponding plaintext. The goal here is to recover the key. Depending on the algorithm, this attack can be very effective. For example, the Caesar cipher key is trivial to recover under this attack. More sophisticated algorithms may have little susceptibility to this attack, however. Plaintext needed for this attack can be obtained with knowledge of the operational details of the adversary. For example, it may be known that an encrypted weather report is sent every day at the same time. Knowledge of that operational detail, along with the actual weather conditions and the intercepted ciphertext, provides the ingredients for this type of attack. The chosen plaintext attack has the same inputs and goals as the known plaintext attack, except that the attacker can choose the plaintext messages to use in the attack. This is naturally a stronger form of attack than the known plaintext because the attacker can choose messages that are likely to yield the most information about the key. A cipher that's secure against the chosen plaintext attack is going to be secure against known plaintext and ciphertext-only attacks. Public key systems are naturally resistant to this form of attack since the decryption key differs from the encryption key. Consequently, this attack is mostly applicable to symmetric key systems. An example of a chosen plaintext attack against a code word, as opposed to a key, comes from the World War II Battle of Midway. U.S. Navy intelligence knew that the Japanese were planning an operation against a target with a code name of AF. Suspecting that AF might refer to the island of Midway, the commander of Midway was ordered to send a radio message in the clear that the Japanese would be likely to intercept, a message indicating a severe water shortage on the island. Soon after this, an intercepted Japanese radio message stating that AF was short of water confirmed the U.S. Navy's suspicions regarding the meaning of the code word AF. The chosen ciphertext attack is similar to the chosen plaintext attack, except that in this case the attacker chooses the ciphertext and the goal is to recover the decryption key. This attack is mainly applicable to public key crypto systems. For symmetric key systems, due to the symmetry in which the same key is used for encryption and decryption, this attack is equivalent in complexity to the known plaintext attack. The birthday attack is an attack against cryptographic hashes, in which a collision between an unspecified pair of messages is sought. To understand this attack, we first consider the so-called birthday paradox. The birthday paradox gets its name from the unintuitive answer to the following problem. How many people must be randomly selected before there's an even chance of one of them sharing your birthday? The answer is 183, which is approximately half of 365, the total number of birthdays in non-leap years, an answer that makes intuitive sense. However, when we ask how many people must be randomly selected before there's an even chance of two or more sharing the same unspecified birthday, the answer drops to only 23, a number that seems unintuitively small. This result can be obtained from the following expression, which gives the probability of k people having no birthdays in common. To obtain the number of people required for a probability of 0.5, we simply keep adding terms. By the time we get to the 23rd term, we arrive at a probability of about 0.5, the solution to the birthday paradox. In more general terms, we can say that a hash of size m only requires hashing an amount of messages given by the square root of m in order to find a collision. This is due to the fact that square root of m messages corresponds to order of m total distinct pairs of messages. So for example, a 128-bit hash like MD5 only provides 64 bits of protection against this kind of attack. So how would you actually conduct such an attack? If you can find a target or victim willing to agree to use an insufficiently strong hashing algorithm for signing a contract, you can use the following procedure to cheat that target. First, generate two versions of a contract document, one with fair terms that the target will agree to, and one with unfair terms in your favor. Next, generate approximately square root of m versions of each document, making subtle and semantically inconsequential changes, like adding whitespace or punctuation. Next, generate hashes and find a matching pair, one document from each set, that is, one fair and one unfair document, both with the same hash. Next, have the target sign the fair version of the selected pair, using a protocol in which only the hash value is signed. In the final step, present the unfair version to a judge, along with your proof that the target agreed to those terms, since you have another document that hashes to the same value as the one that the target agreed to. Finally, we consider the meet-in-the-middle attack. This is a form of known plaintext attack against non-group cryptographic algorithms. A group is a mathematical concept applying to a set that has various properties under some operation, in our case, encryption. If a given encryption algorithm forms a group, then two-round encryption, that is, encrypting twice with two different keys, is equivalent to encrypting once with some third key. In this case, double encryption can be attacked by simple one-round brute force. If, on the other hand, the algorithm does not form a group, then if we have plaintext and ciphertext pairs, we can attack it with the meet-in-the-middle attack. In this attack, we perform the first round of encryption of the plaintext with all possible keys K1. Next, perform the first round of decryption of the ciphertext with all possible keys K2, and look for matches in the intermediate results of the two operations. False positives in the form of multiple matches are possible. These can be reduced if we have further plaintext-ciphertext pairs against which we can test a candidate key pair. Note that the overall difficulty of this attack is only twice that of brute force search. Consequently, two-round encryption, such as that of DES, is considered insecure.